Hey gang, this is Tanya and Paul here, and we're going to be doing a round analysis. We did one of these a while back for like NSDA finals, and there are a lot of people who were like, "Oh my god, why did you say these kids could be better at debate? Why would you give feedback? Are you coaching them or something?" Oh my god. Yes, that's actually exactly what we do here. And because we wanted to prove that that's just how we approach it with our own students and with whatever, right? Like you just give them feedback when they mess up. Most of coaching is pointing out when someone did something bad and then trying to fix it for them, and is very collaborative. We decided to watch a round of me in 2017. So this is my junior year. And this is like right when I'm starting to turn the corner. We're in national elims, and like we end up being in the semifinals of this tournament before we lose to the team that ultimately ends up closing it out for the first time. And so, this is years and years ago, right? I've only been debating for, I guess, 3 years at this time because I didn't debate in high school. Tanya, introduce yourself, I guess, a little bit if you want, or to whatever degree you think you need to do that, or just before because I'm about to go deep on like the lore before we go. You're just
Go
good.
on the floor. Go
All
into
right,
the
cool.
floor.
I'm going into the lore. So, real quick, let me just set the scene for you folks before we get into the actual round. This round, we are affirmative against UNR AM, which is Daniel Armbrust and Grace Miller. A lot of things about that. One, they were from University of Nevada, Reno, and we're from Pacific, so we're from the same region, and we've debated 4 years. Grace was like my nemesis when I was a community college debater. She was a community college debater, and I was a community college debater. Grace like just whooped my ass every time we ever debated, and Grace ends up being top speaker at this tournament. But by this point, me and Dallas are just taking UNR souls. We haven't lost like a round to any of their teams in like a minute. The next year we have some challenges, but yeah, we are debating them. And the important thing is we're all really good friends. Like everyone in this debate likes each other, has known each other since like in Dallas like 16 or something when she met Grace or whatever. Like we all know each other, we all get along, and we had a lot of fun. And so I like this round a lot because the vibes are pretty good as far as like we're not mad at each other. We have a good time with it. That's all I want to say because I don't want to give you any spoilers about things. We definitely want to hear your opinion on who won and whatnot, and we'll tell you who won and all that stuff at the end. But we're gonna get into it. Tanya, are you ready to start flowing?
I am,
And then
yes.
obviously, per usual, Tanya, anytime you need to, you want me to pause it or whatever, let me know. Let's go. Observation 1 of the analysis A is the resolution the United States federal government should establish rules engaging governing its use of offensive cyber warfare. B is the plan, which we say that the United States federal government should establish rules engaging governing its use of offensive cyber warfare. Establishing that the U.S. may only engage in offensive cyber warfare in response to a cyber attack. Once again, that's a resolution. Establishing that the United States may only engage in offensive cyber warfare in response to a cyber attack. Can you read it for you one more time? It is establishing that the United States may. We'll get to you after this. I've read it twice. It's reading here. I'm already stopping it. This is an important Parley thing you need to understand about. This is why Parley is the way it is now. It started here, like this year, okay? So Berkeley has started reading theory that you must pass the plan text. They read actually this NPTE, so like a week before this. They started reading theory and said you must pass a copy of the plan text before the next speech, basically. So usually at NPTE, there was cross-text. So this is a whole other thing. This is so long ago. Parley didn't have cross-text at this point, right? There was no flex time. You had to answer questions during your speech, which you'll see. They just asked us one right there, obviously. But Berkeley, because of that, used to say you must give us a copy like by the end of your speech, essentially, written down. Now we back then, like everyone else, because it's not a textual event, used to just say the plan text twice. And Daniel is trying to abuse this and just like interrupt the PMC right away, just basically get in like a free kind of questiony type thing. And I'm like, at first I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna read it twice, like F you, Daniel, how dare you, whatever. But then I'm like, oh wait, we might lose on this because like people are feeling a certain way, and so Dallas is just writing it down. But this is where that started, this year 2017. So it's almost been 10 years of this nonsense. If anyone was the infrastructure, the ACE point of the infrastructure will now the first argument is that cybersecurity standards are not uniform across the United States. For now, the ACE point is that the U.S. cybersecurity has what they call their 5 pillars, but they don't actually enforce these via any institution, which essentially means that it is led to world proliferation. These points to the Indian president, Mukherjee, I believe is how you pronounce his name, has indicated that as a result, the United States is not leading the process. They are having to develop their own standards how to do offensive and defensive cybersecurity, because that essentially means that they are having to proliferate the status quo. The second argument is going to be that the offensive mindset of the United States currently feels for attacks. We necessarily that Russia is probably incredibly indicative of this, because offensive attacks don't necessarily come and just attack the actual
infrastructure, also cover things of hacking goddamn elections, which is necessarily bad. Additionally, DDoS attacks, necessarily attack financial sector, which is necessarily bad. Additionally, we the form of preemptive attacks we've been doing have also led to issues like Iran have developed their own cybersecurity warfare programs to respond to the United States threat. But the third argument is given that cyber attacks are coming now on key infrastructure. The AC one is given that the CBO has indicated the utilities are currently vulnerable within the United States as a result of our offensive mindset, specifically the fact that we are targeting nations we have no way to really respond to other countries in the world. We're able to use things like VPN, which means we're just guessing whenever we try and attack a country offensively. The next argument is going to be the NSA has indicated that cyber attacks are an imminent threat upon survival destruction of the United States. The AC point is going to be the nuclear power plants that exist on the East Coast side. There are 200 of them exist as right now, which is an indication that they all rely on the same system of security. They additionally all potentially collapse. Most conditions, the question of the dams in California. There's already been 2 attempted attacks on specific dams in California, which necessarily been cut off water access to over 11 million people, which necessarily going to be bad because the plan solves. The first argument is going to be the plan established rules of games for the United States that we will not be using the rules of preemptive attacks that currently exist for the status quo, which means that we're able to solve the question for proliferation. But the second argument is going to be that we're able to spotlight the changing warfare practices. I mean, as I said, that the war with the United States is no longer being off, like, being preemptive minded. There's a difference between offensive and preemptive. Then we said that necessarily having retaliatory effects, so it's going to be better on this question. Yes.
What are you defining as cyber warfare? What does that include?
What does cyber warfare include?
Yeah, like there's tons of different forms of cyber attacks. There's economic cyber attacks. There's military
actions by
cyber.
a nation state or a non-state actor that would penetrate authors. What does it say? Penetrating nations, computers, or networks for the purpose of causing damage or disruption.
That is how we define that, y'all. Go to the internal link.
That is a moment that I think is like relevant and matters, not like strategically or whatever, right? But we've talked about this a lot. In close debates, if the judges think you're like generally likable, that's a good thing for you, right? And so I'm sitting there, I'm actually losing my mind because this is like one of my first national elims against a team that was like the 1 or the 2 seed or something to that effect. Grace was top speaker, and I'm like, Dallas, you need to finish reading this thing. I have so much stuff left to read in this speech. And I'm just sitting there like trying to play it cool, just like whatever. And like we'll just make a joke after it. But like I am 100% sweating bullets right here. And like I didn't have a definition of cyber warfare written down. I was about to just make something up. But fortunately, Dallas had it ready to go, right? So terrifying moment in my career that I tried to play off very much.
The internal link is going to be talking to that first argument.
Sorry, did you have something to say, Tanya?
I was just gonna say could have been faster though.
Could have been faster, for sure. Yeah, I mean, bro, she's like later on she reads it and it's like slightly different than that too. I'm pretty sure. So I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
The United States cybersecurity forces prevents all the proliferation that's occurring in status quo as a result of the offensive the preemptive mindset we have right now. But the second argument, the shift from preemptive to reactive, is also going to be good for the United States and the world. We're able to focus on how we respond to attacks. It's always better than having to send out attacks like that. We don't necessarily need to be attacking people's cyber warfare in the first place. It's only a question of being able to protect our own infrastructure, which we say plan necessarily begin for when we say that. The third argument is that after this, we will ultimately see collapse of infrastructure which affect the most vulnerable population, reaching the impact. The first argument is we see that infrastructure attacks always affect the most disproportionately affected as of right now, either those individuals who are 1 meal away from starvation or who need to have water access in the first place. Each people go things like crops in the first place, so necessarily means that we say that this hurts individuals like poor rural farmers throughout the United States, but especially in Central Valley like California, which is exactly where we're from. Especially in the world, we're always dealing with the drought. Necessarily means that any loss of access to water, even 11%, but also results in collapse of infrastructure, meaning that millions of people starve. Which brings us to advantage 2, international framework.
Pausing. Okay, so people who can't flow or whatever. The plan essentially, the resolution's about cyber warfare, right, and like changing U.S. cyber warfare policies. We defend altering the U.S.'s posture to not allow for preemptive strike. Basically, it's like NFU, but for cyber warfare, right? We say that it has to be reactionary or whatever it's going to be. Advantage 1 is just like domestic infrastructure attacks are bad. They target things like the energy sector, they target things like the food sector, the water sector, etc. And in the energy, it can cause problems with its nuclear power plants or whatever. This is the Sam Cooke argument we stole from like the year before. But basically, we're just going for like people should get food, and cyber attacks could potentially stop that, right? Like it's not like something super complicated. I will note the reason we're reading this app, and I kind of didn't mention this earlier, but UNR had been reading this like criticism, something similar to what you'll see them read in this debate, that was very much about like a critique of the sort of masculine norms of international politics, sort of like a fem-IR angle. And so we in prep were like, hey, how do we just link turn that? Let's just read an app that's like, let's just never attack anyone unless they attack us first. And then let's make sure none of our impacts are about like nuclear war or anything. Let's just make them about eating food, which causes somewhat of a problem in that the impact, which you'll see in a second, of Advantage 2 is the exact same as Advantage 1, except it's international. So Advantage 1 is domestically we won't have food, and Advantage 2's impact is, you're never going to believe this, India won't have food either, and there's even more people there, so that's bad. Thoughts on that as a strategy, Don?
I get where you're coming from with the avoiding the K. I think that on a cyber attacks topic, I think you just personally just read the impact and let it happen. But I could see where you guys are coming from. But I think personally, I would just be like, read the K.
I
It's
think this is exact. So that's actually, I think Tanya's in something so important here, and like obviously this is years and years ago, but like we've talked about this, like Tanya, when you were on the team and stuff, when Brendan and Tristan were around, but like our motto kind of came like, just throw down. How about you just read it, bro? Okay, you want to whatever K you're gonna read it. We'll say that our shit is good, but at this time, very much I was so. Well, you know, Dallas was a lot better than me in general, but especially when it came to like answering the K. The K was very new to me. I was a CC debater like a year before this debate started, and had never learned about the K, so someone let us know back then. Tanya, shout out. Tanya got that policy changed. But because of that, my whole thought process was like, we need to answer the K before we get into the round rather than during it, because otherwise I might screw it up. And so this is very much like a like training wheels for Paul strategy. But Tanya's definitely right. Like, just defend your shit. If they say cat bad, say cat good. Whatever.
But if you start off, you die. That's bad. I should have said that. So I'd be on the up. Vantage 2 is international framework. Really? Yeah. The ace of one is the cyber warfare is lacking the international framework due to a lack of rules of engagement, a lack of leadership. The first argument is literally the wild, wild west out there. The ace of point, there are no standards enforced effectively in any country. Even the United States 5 pillars that we've already talked about are not actually enforced by the United States. It's just a suggestion, which means that the national sovereignty of the visa point is the Indian Pakistan are seeing escalation occurring as right now because they don't have a rule of cyber engagement. Either they're both operating on different paradigms, necessarily means that either one of them is doing whatever the bombs the cost them to proliferate. But the second argument is that unchecked cyber warfare will continue to use the ace of point. The Xi Jinping has indicated that they will be able to go against the United States at any cost because they can't actually defend against us in terms of an actual military offensive strike. They can always be able to outside attacks and normally control the tech industry. As we're now, the next argument is also going to be recently. This also concur the issue of non-state actors like that they feel that they have to offensively hack the United States and more we threaten them. I know we try to hack a database that I said we're going to be able to record what individuals are actually within that group, and they feel that was just a question of allowing for another Muslim registry. But another indication as why is there bad. But these links, the plan establishes rules of engagement. The first argument is that we're requiring a policy of not allowing for preemptive strikes, but necessarily be modeling the international community. We've said that countries like India are already looking for this from the United States, as well as China, and a war where they're able to respond to that, and they learn how to free the United States. They will solve things. You probably think the nuclear policy in the allies right now. In a war we don't first strike people that prevent them from one day first strike us in the first place. But this is what allows for that check back in the first place. The second argument is spotlight tools of engagement, i.e., this creates a uniform policy that countries can actually be beholden to. The 5 pillars don't work, and let's enforce the plan actually is supposed to be enforced. The third argument is supposed to be other countries saying that this would be covered by countries like first off by non-state actors, but additionally by countries like China, India, Pakistan, which actually resolve the problems. Turning never speaking to journalists. You say rules of engagement is critical to check for attacks on the international community. The first argument is obviously going to be all about the United States. The first argument is
Tanya?
where in the uniqueness does it say that non-state actors are going to follow U.S. standards? I'm a little confused by that argument.
So that's a great question. The uniqueness definitely does not really say non-state actors are going to follow it. So the argument there's two. So one, there's two arguments at play here. One, which is also something I think we saw from Sam Cooke. There was this argument about how India at this time had basically requested the United States to intervene in like the conflict between India and Pakistan, and to establish like standards for cyber warfare or whatever. And so that's the modeling argument that I think we end up going for later. The argument we're trying to like, does it fit in this box? Does a square peg fit in a circle hole? I sure hope it does. Is basically that the only reason ISIS is interested in attacking the United States right now is because shortly prior to this, actually, we had done a cyber attack against ISIS. And this is right after the Muslim registry stuff was happening with Donald Trump. And in the media, the ISIS leadership is portraying it as like, this is like another attempt at a Muslim registry. They're just trying to say like, everyone's an ISIS. They're trying to monitor Muslim people, whatever. And so like, we're basically trying to shoehorn both of those things into like, as long it's just mad checks back for ISIS because they're a rational actor and whatever. Doesn't make a ton of sense. And I will also note that this time of debate, like this year and the year before it, ISIS is like the thing. Like in 2017, 2016, ISIS is like the big bad boogeyman. And so you kind of had to shoehorn in some stuff like that to a certain degree.
I see.
Yeah. But great question. Not there is the answer to your question. That would be a great question for them to ask, Tanya. And so just to stay on this for like one more second, for a lot of you that just intuitively kind of makes sense or whatever, for those of you who don't, what Tanya trying to establish is basically this, right? Anytime you have an internal link, there should be a uniqueness argument that internal link speaks to, right? Because the function of an internal link is to explain how the link changes the uniqueness. We're all of a sudden saying, man, these people are going to get on board and they're going to love it if the United States does this and they won't attack people and like do terrorism anymore. But there's no argument in the uniqueness that indicates like they're asking for this. It's just us sort of like trying to, again, cram the square into the circle hole.
For the anti-actions of nations, i.e. that the problem solves for things like Stuxnet, i.e. the United States developed a virus that would be able to shut down various programs, and Israel literally stole that offensive technology from us and then used it on centrifuges that are wrong, which necessarily means that war wasn't maybe solved in the war, but they see it as an ally, and other countries that are necessarily antagonistic to the United States no longer have to fear us on this question. But the second argument is the rules of engagement will always significantly stem the rise of cyber proliferation in the world. We're not at, well, the United States isn't proliferating. No one else feels like they have to because the global hegemon is not trying to go against them, which brings us to the impact. We see some studies that get best. We talk about on a global scale. I answer the question. Again, we're the starvation. Yeah, there are a lot of people starving in the United States for now, but there are literally billions starving in the other countries of the world. Additionally, it's questions targets on civilian populations. There are always the collateral damage that occurs via things like cyber attacks. We never actually do a cyber attack on the government. We always dwell either financial institutions or the various infrastructure that exists as of now, which essentially means that this results in billions of people dying of world starvation, or the lots of critical infrastructure, including things like necessarily things for cleaning out the environment, which would be the first thing that would go in terms of an attack on China. But additionally, we said that India is one of the most poverty countries in the world, which means the world where we're able to shut down India, their infrastructure, including power or water. Billions of people certainly die. Let's go to the framework on bottom.
So here's the problem. You see, so earlier Dallas needed the plan text to write it down, but that was my flow because she didn't bother to write down the plan, which has an MG's specialty or whatever. Which is why I always tell my MGs like write down the plan so they have to worry about it or whatever. And so I had written my framework on that sheet because originally I think I was planning on reading it before the app, but then I was like, I don't know if I'll get to the app if I do this. And whatever, we'll just answer the K if we have to answer the K. And so now I look down for a second and you could like see my face. But where'd my framework argument go? And then I'm like, okay, thank God Dallas has it. It's right there. Again, just absolutely spazzing out in this round, like underneath hope.
Yo, sorry about that, y'all. Even the world against true battles debates a matter of competing ethical worldviews. Once again, they evaluate this debate as a matter of competing worldviews. The first argument they failed is illusory. Obviously, that doesn't actually happen. It's a question of evaluating the worldviews and debating affirmative against good ethical leadership. They built from the second argument is the ethics of worldviews of all you say in the world. We understand the ethical orientation we have to ourselves. We understand the forms of knowledge that we have created. The third argument is we should evaluate negative is a question of ethics in the world. We say that the negatives are key because you would justify killing 1 billion.
Yes.
I mean, we talk about this a lot, but I guess I should just point out, like, reading the framework on at the end of the PMC is probably not the most efficient use of time. It's
so interesting because I'm red pilled, whatever, on that 100% now. Like, I basically never have kids do this much the answer the K in the back half. I've talked to Brenna about this. I think her last year competition, so I don't know if her mind has changed since then. But like at that time, her and Tristan, as far as I'm aware, so I don't want to misrepresent them, still thought that was kind of a thing, and everyone kind of was doing it. And I can see it from both perspectives, but yeah, the problem with reading this is like, we don't know that they're going to read the K. We've already written our entire app to try and link turn the K. And so we're putting all of our eggs into the answering the K basket. And if they had just been like T, disadd, counterplay, I'm like, there's 3 minutes of this speech that are pointless.
3 minutes?
I did approximately, I guess. It was just like a bunch of it's like K preempted, you know what I mean? Like this is about to be done. But the other thing I'll point is this. I started explaining stuff here, and this was the hardest habit for me to break, and I really didn't get out of it until my senior year when I stopped being the PM and started being the MG. But like, I made an argument, people probably already understood it, but now I'm sitting here slowly explaining it. And Dallas, you probably didn't see Dallas, but she's literally going like this, what are you doing? And I still see this with a number of students that I work with, right, where like, they just slow down for no reason when they do not have the time to do so. You just got to turn and burn at a certain point. Like, if it's the last thing you're going to say, go ahead and say it slowly, and you'll see me do that in this debate. But, like, there is no excuse for me to not be going, like, basically top speed. And I end up cutting off a bunch of framework arguments because I didn't have time. But I try to make it look like this was the plan the whole time. We'll see if you notice, Tommy.
People say 1 million, 1 people think that evidence can absolutely use up to the next argument. The decent moments that policy should be referred to as the first argument is debate, legislating training ground and societal resistance in order to be able to understand policy making, how we inform the superstructure, and how we inform the next argument is that we are ultimately all policymakers. I think through micro political action, we're able to understand every single way we consider life sense. That means it's also becoming critical of the next argument. These are first stemming proximal impacts. I that it's a question of resolving for proximal things. Like, we're not trying to solve for nuclear war. We're just trying to make sure people have access to food, people have access to water, because that's the most probable thing that will affect them now. That's what cyber attacks are occurring on now. There has not been one that actually resulted in a nuclear attack.
Yeah, I am of the belief, I don't know if you are, Tanya, I think you want the timer to like go off right when you finish speaking, like in an ideal world. Like, I don't love the like spreading through the end because I think it kind of perceptually makes it look like you ran out of time rather than like you planned it. And so there's a moment you can see about 6 seconds before the speech ends, if you're a nerd and paying attention, where you see me look down at my timer and then I just stop looking at my paper because I'm like, I'm not gonna read anything else. I'm just gonna like go for this proximate thing and like slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
That's the PMC. There's no cross-X because they didn't add that till the next year. So initial thoughts, Tanya, before we get into the LO.
Okay. Okay. Well, I get why you guys chose the strategy that you did. I do think that like, do they end up, I forget if they end up reading the K or
They do. They read KDAT, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So they still end up reading the K anyway, and I guess we'll see how that goes, but I think like if it was me, I don't know that I would read the K and I would just go for extinction impacts. It is parley, so it's not like they have like their files that they can just choose a different whatever, but I think you could maybe dome something. You don't have prep, so I can see why they decided to read the K anyway. But I think if it was me in this situation, immediately like you're just going for some kind of extinction impact since the AF is just kind of seeded what I think is their main like source of offense. So I think that that's a potential issue. It doesn't end up happening. So all's well that ends well, I suppose. But I think that could be a problem. A lot of this is like very preemptive of one strategy, which like if they were a team that only ever read the K ever, like there was literally nothing they ever read that wasn't that, I think that could make sense. But even then, having like some kind of like B strat where it's like this might mean that we link, but if it's not the K, it's something we can go for would be good.
Yeah, I think that something that you're speaking to is one, just difference between like modern Parley and modern LD and like Parley back in the day, right? The difference in your ability to audible and change the strategy when you know you have 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes, depending on LD, Parley, whatever, before you have to give the speech after the PMC has changed the meta in such a way that if you didn't like have it in prep, there's no shot you have it in the debate. And you just kind of go with whatever you planned ahead of time. I think there's a lot more audibles happening nowadays, especially in LD where like you have your files and stuff, right? It's like if someone read a strategy this bad, you'd be like, okay, and then just we're out big stick 'em, K 'em, whatever you want. But yeah, totally agree.
Which would happen sometimes with me that they would try and preempt Cap and I would just read something else because I was like,
yeah,
okay, I guess you're right, Cap. Good. Let's move on.
Yeah, I'm a fan, I guess. Okay, cool.
That's a bad combo.
Dude, me too this morning. Okay, it's gonna be 2 off in case. I want their framework page after the first off.
Nice.
Yeah, you see what I'm doing?
You know what's
It's
happening.
a criticism.
What's happening?
Good vibes.
I
Having
want the
fun.
framework after the framework that's on the bottom after the first off.
Okay,
So new sheet, framework sheet of the affirmative, and then the second off, and then the case in order. You will need the background page. I'm gonna dump some arguments there.
Sorry, am I going to put the K on top or after our framework?
After the
After.
framework.
Okay,
After.
cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
KK?
Oh, that is...
You say a third one, or something.
Dallas just made the dumbest joke in the world that no one in the room but me, Dallas, and Grace understood. Grace said KK, and Dallas said, if you say a third one, it's a link. Because KKK, obviously. And it's just... Anyway, I think we all realized that in like a second. It's just like, my God.
Alright. First off, this is Top County on cyber warfare. The interpretation is that cyber warfare is an act of war against another country. Cyber warfare is an act of war against another country. The violation is that they don't have
We're
another.
gonna pause real quick. Did you get that interp down, Tanya? What is the problem with that interp? So I think this is a very important thing for people to hone in on, right? Because actually, in fact, the number one thing we haven't mentioned this. Me and Tanya are running like a debate commune, debate co-op this summer with some people from our region, and we've been having a lot of theory discussions. And one thing I've noticed and that Tanya's also pointed out is that the theory debate has been pretty bad at the interp level. People have been writing bad interps or not reading counter interps or like not reading interps they need or whatever it might be. And I remember in this round, the second I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, there's just no way they can win T. So is there anything jumping out to you, Tanya, based on their definition of cyber warfare?
What's the res one more time?
The United States should, think about it. Something to the effect like the United States should significantly alter its cyber warfare policy or whatever, something like that.
Cyber warfare policy. I have
Something
the
to that effect.
cyber warfare is an act of war against another country. Is that right?
Yeah, that's their term.
Well, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't have anything to do with cyber attacks.
Perfect, and that's exactly what happens in this debate, Tanya. And like
Okay.
immediately, yeah, because it's like I heard that and I'm like, that's not a definition of this is clearly a
Yeah,
definition of warfare, and this
yeah.
ends up being an issue for them in the debate, right? But like Tanya and me, Dallas in this instance, like it's funny because Dallas doesn't realize it, and I pointed out at the end, and she like kind of realized like, ah, shit, I didn't need to spend much time on this, whatever, and like just kind of makes fun of them for a second. But the point being, every level of theory matters, and people, for the most part, only debate the standards. Like that's where most of the time goes into. But if you catch your opponent doing something like this, where it's like you can just clown on them for reading a definition of a word that makes no sense whatsoever, that is very strategic and in your favor. And so pay attention to interps is one of the biggest pieces of feedback I would give any student in a theory. You have thoughts on that, Tanya, or just like, yeah?
No, I think I agree. Yeah, that has been a problem, is like not really thinking about the interp because they have an idea of generally what the standards are that they want to read, and then just kind of reading whatever as the interp, and the other team just kind of accepting it because they also get like generally what the team is going for, when as the AF you don't want to be just agreeing with what they're generally implying.
I'm going to give one last piece of context. So just remember what's coming up. So they read at K. It's going to be sort of fem-IR, sort of like feminine debate, masculine norms, bad, that sort of stuff. And there's an argument that Grace is going to read about like how the stuff is operating in the Parley sector. And if you pay attention, Tony, you'll be flowing to might not see it, but you're going to see Dallas, like I think she kind of looks at me or like looks over at them and like doesn't look super stoked. That is because at this time there had been I don't know if we even talked about this on Proteus before, but like basically there was a lawsuit that happened at Pacific prior to my time there, time prior to anyone's time there, who's like currently at the program, about like sexual harassment, like a Title IX thing. And we had like during this national cycle that had like happened, like literally the lawsuit like came out during nationals, like day 1 or day 2 of it. And so there had been a lot of like sort of stuff with that. And so Dallas hears that and thinks they're about to just like read a K now about like us being bad because of that. So there's like a weird, but yeah, just historical context. Anyway,
Wasn't
go ahead.
I'll ask after.
Okay.
If the state defined it in the PMC, it's just like this definition, but additionally they don't just do this against the military, which means that it's not actually an act of war. They do it against any entity in the social sphere, which means that we would always be in cause of war. But the standards, the first thing we ground is that this heated predictability for the negative. The virus actually have the prep time, otherwise we have to reprime it in the 7 minutes. Additionally, that allows them to turn their advantages into what should be disasters, which means that they are jacking the negative ground. The second argument is going to be limited, so we have to limit the debate in order to create creativity, because otherwise we only do whatever we want. The affirmative can pick and choose whatever they do, which means that the third danger is topical leadership, because we never actually discuss the topic, which means that we can never get the education that they're talking about, which means that we don't get spillover that they're going to have to be winning because of the framework, but voters.
No, extra T.
Oh, the next one is extravagalities, and anything outside of this would be extravagality when the abuses already happen, because they get to pick their advantages, which are like already happened in the PMC. Also, they can't be conditional on the app, means that they have to like use them. Voters. First thing is the APR, because you have to establish rules of the game before you play. But the next argument is going to be education. If we don't get education, that means that we can't become actors in the outside world, which means that there's no value to debate. The second argument is going to be competitive equity, which means that we are always excluding one team from around that creates exclusive debate spaces, which pushes out new debaters and novice debaters. The next argument is competing interpretations, which means evaluate the interpretation of the standards debate to determine who did the best debate. All right, their framework. First off, your ethic is bad. You are literally talking about doing militarism. The next argument is that you're using net benefits in your prioritization. The magnitude is always going to be masculine at the point that we say, like, go big or go home. It always prioritizes the high magnitude and doesn't look at the probability and the systemic impacts that actually happen. But the next argument is we're going to be more proximal than you, because we are going to critique the debate space, which means that we are going to have the most proximal impact.
Dinah is flowing, so she's definitely not seeing my face in that moment just a second ago. Students to this day, like frequently my students, other students have been like, you just make faces when we say stuff that you don't like and that you think is dumb. I just want proof that I think that is just how I debated. Anytime I hear a debater, like there was a second ago, I was just like, wait, what? Like the stinkiest of stink faces. You look like you had something for a second there, or did I?
Yes, I guess I was thinking what was the res one more time? It was like cyber warfare rules, like change the norms of cyber warfare.
It's something to that effect. Like the United States change the United States offensive cyber policy.
I was just saying, I guess I see now how the negative could read a link that like a retaliation link or something that like it's punitive to side like whatever in response to, but I don't know if that's what they're gonna read, but now
Sure.
I'm like,
Yeah,
I guess it is the link that they could maybe.
and it is, I think, from an order perspective, I think Grace picked the wrong order. I don't think it makes any sense to read all of these case arguments she's about to read, basically, before you read the K, because they're all aligned with sort of the thesis of the K, and it like doesn't make a ton of sense until the K comes out. Like they're like, we started like, you're literally militarism, and it's like, well, that's not an impact until we get to the K and like the sort of like sort of establishing that stuff.
I thought that the K was gonna be first, and that's why framework was under the first
Yeah.
So I was very surprised when it was T.
Yeah.
But
around. Additionally, they argue that fiat isn't real. Yeah, we agree, which means that the only method you have is the policy-making framework that you engage in, and the normative debate structures that you are doing in the PMC, which means that you don't have any proximal impacts. I'm pretty sure the power grid is an proximal impact to this debate round, but additionally, not really a proximal impact to like anything, especially at the point that you can't resolve any of this means that you don't get solvency for your affirmative. Okay. Framework. The first argument is that we have to use debate space for social activism, divorcing ourselves from our lived reality through fictional series allows us to ignore participation in a problematic system and further pushes people out without ever giving them a voice, relegating the discussion to the private sphere is what.
Very subtle. Again, you weren't watching almost heard Tanya. Dallas, after Dallas clears and Grace doesn't really slow down, Dallas is glancing up and scanning the judges to see if she thinks they're good at this. Because she's like, if I'm not getting it, they're not getting it, right? And again, that's an important thing to discuss. Like, you need to, the judge is the one that determines who's going to win the round. And this is sort of a rainbow pattern. Right? There's literally, one of the judges is sitting on the ground in front of us, right? Like, and so the capacity for people to flow given speeds and all that stuff pretty relevant, especially when you're at nationals, especially in high school, where like high school nationals, like it could be a random parent, it could be someone technical. And so making sure people are keyed into that stuff pretty important.
Continues violence not allowing to check against activism. This is what has continued domestic violence in many situations where they don't actually ever get a check against this. The second argument is the debate is unique spaces because we don't actually pass policy, which means that this is a space for critical thought, and we have to in order to be effective, we have to look at the critical ideas that we have. The third argument is that in-rhyme is key because inclusivity forums to go unattended. We can look at the national student meeting that had dismal representation, but additionally inclusivity forums at camps that don't get attended, which means that round is the only place that we can talk about this. This makes this discussion of inclusivity mandatory. The fourth argument is that the negative is a series of speech acts challenging the masculinity in debate and inviting people to join coalition building to break down masculinity. The fifth argument is the role of the ballot. Vote for the team that provides the best method for combating patriarchy in debate. Vote for the team that provides the best method for combating patriarchy in debate. Reasons to prefer. The first reasons to prefer are all of the reasons why I read earlier, but additionally this is the most proximal in the round because it's the only thing that actually affects us. Our rhetoric and our methods are the only thing that we will take out outside of debate when we leave this debate. But the next argument is that there are real effects of this. We can build coalitions and make the debate a more inclusive space, but additionally there are people who are going to be watching this round, and there are newer debaters who are at home watching this tournament exactly, which means that we have spillover effects in the debate community and making a better future for debate.
How did she know? She was so prescient in that way. Yeah, that's why she won top speaker. Anyway.
Links. The first argument is that to be more towards masculinity, the communication style is aggressive and prefers rationality over emotional appeal, rate of delivery, or stylistic presentation. Policy and government are also masculine. The United States is rooted in Christianity, which normalizes men dominating women. The second argument is that women are caught in a double-minded debate. In order to win, you have to perform masculinity, but then you can turn around and people call you a bitch or antisocial for not actually engaging. The third argument is that women crime is a problem too. Bell Hooks argues that sexism is so deeply ingrained that there's an enemy within where we are always taught to fight for patriarchal approval, which leads to jealousy and hatred and exclusion of women. The next argument is that the opposite construction of masculinity, little a, is that they literally focus on the global hegemon in the United States. Being able to do this is rooted in the ability to control and dominate others and to create modeling to basically influence people to do other things. The little b is that warfare is historically combative and it's construction of masculinity. The little c is that the cyber culture is extremely masculine because women hackers is a specific coalition that gets pushed out constantly, and women gamers are always ignored. The fifth argument is that complacency in the patriarchy.
Tanya, your face when you said women gamers were always ignored. This is like Gamergate time. This is like when that was happening. So.
Okay, I was a little confused what that had to do with anything.
Anyway, again, it's of the moment, of its time.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
See what the patriarchy, when debaters argue that discussion already happened and the solvency of framework arguments indicate that we are complacent in the system by just running normative acts and never actually challenging it. Impacts. The first argument is that sexual assault is rampant in this community. You can see the several Title IX challenges that have been shutting down programs and the individual debaters that have been and coaches that have been called out. We argue that we would be able to resolve this because the hyper-masculine allows individuals to think that they get a bunch of trophies and they can abuse other individuals. We should break this down so we can,
I don't know
check
if
back
you
for
were,
a lot of sexual assault.
I don't know if you watched there, but it's way bigger than I remember. It wasn't very subtle. Like Dallas like stops flowing, looks left and right, touches me, and like points at her, and then I say no, like we're fine. Because like she was like, do we need to call like a point of personal privilege or whatever kind of situation, basically.
And start a discussion, but the next argument is that militarism also increases sexual assault in the community, or sexual assault, because the United States military has higher rates of sexual assault. The second argument is feminine flight, is that women and non-heteronormative individuals join the activity twice the rate of men, but leave in the upper levels of because of structural barriers, because it takes twice the amount of work in order to actually get any recognition. The next argument is that this just means reject the discrimination of debate. Alternative, sign the ballot negative as a commitment to build critical feminist alliances, sign the ballot negative as a commitment to building critical feminist alliances. Solvency. The first argument is that this is an ethical radical feminism. It allows us to use things like consciousness raising, where we educate and understand the structures of domination so we can in order to combat them. The next argument is that consciousness raising can include absolutely anyone, but hooks argues that men should actually be included in consciousness raising because we have to educate everyone in order to combat it. The second argument is this allows for self-reflexivity because we can understand that we have an intersection of identities, which means that there are points of privilege within our own identity, and we have to be self-reflexive. The third argument is that this is invitational rhetoric, which means that people can actually join to combat in the community. It means that this allows them for building feminist alliances like mentorship programs and reaching out to individuals. The next argument is that this is intersectional because Angela Davis says that we have to use the politics of location to look across asymmetrical relations, which means that this encompasses not only the queer body but also racial bodies, because we can look at more than just gender. The sixth argument is that this solves the act. It solves the act because of the combative nature of the methodology of the affirmative. Constructive warfare is constant and aggressive, which means that this is the logic that leads to the never-ending warfare that occurs. It allows us to take different approaches to warfare besides just masculinity. Case.
You reserve the right to defend the status quo.
True. That we do. On your case. You don't.
I still think that's the wackest thing in the world to say when someone has the status, by the way. Just say condo. Do you think they're not going to read condo because you say we reserve the right to defend the status quo? Like, our status quo is always an option.
Reserve the right to defend the status quo. That's simply what it is.
Are you condo or dispo or not? It's fine. Like, the shell's coming out. Okay. I don't know. Anyway.
They reserve the right.
They did reserve that right. They should have exercised that right. But anyway, we'll talk about it.
I don't actually. I guess it depends. That was just their framework answers. Never mind. I thought if they have turns on case, I guess.
It's coming up.
Okay, because I was like, otherwise it doesn't really make sense.
100%.
Condo,
yeah.
But if
I forgot in my brain they read it just had they don't. They would just read turns on case.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Don't solve anything. Have you met the federal government? Have you seen what Trump has been doing? He will define anything as being an attack. Your interpretation of a cyber attack means that Trump can literally grandstand and say that literally anything is an attack. The Russian going into the elections could be considered an attack, which means that now we can engage in full cyber warfare of Russia. Means that you don't actually change anything, but additionally you just turn this because you allow for us to completely explode this. But also your 5 pillars arguments means that 1, there's already an infrastructure, and 2, it's not enforced, which means that you don't have any unique enforcement, meaning that you can't actually solve your app. But the next argument is going to be turned is that we're going to redirect money to the cyber warfare in order to bolster opposition. Means that you only make the cyber attacks worse on the advantages. You don't do anything to change the offensive mindset, means that the criticism is going to be able to solve this better. But the next argument is that we will just continue to attack and ostracize other people. This is the logic of creating an enemy, which means that we will always just construct more enemies engaging in warfare, and this gives a justification to go to Congress and ask for war. We would argue that Trump is isolating Republicans who aren't on his side now with the healthcare bill, which means that he will be able to target more Republicans and shut them out, meaning that he will get a formal declaration of war, and this will lead to World War III. Probably means that the infrastructure will already be turned out. But the next argument is that infrastructure costs is inevitable. Spending all this is dismal, which means that if the infrastructure collapses, we would actually do something to fix it, because Trump can't keep popular support if the infrastructure is down, which means that he will actually direct the proper funds. On your next advantage, you can't solve. Next argument is that no one models us. China and Russia have been attacking us regardless of what we do.
I don't know how that's a turn, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead. What's up?
Yeah, that was basically what my thing was. Is for a lot of this, I don't know what the uniqueness is. They don't have any evidence saying that Trump wants to do any of this, and I don't understand why the AF would uniquely make this worse. Sure, it even if the definition of cyber attack is broad, right now there is no restriction, so shouldn't we be seeing it now?
100%. So now that's the LOC. She says 3 more words. You're the MG, what are you thinking, right? So they have a condo K with no like disad or counterplan strategy, and then they have a T that's pretty bad. What do you think needs to be the approach? Like, how do you leverage the AF? Do you feel like parts of the AF are undercovered, or like, what is your sort of thing? Obviously, she doesn't get to advantage too, but yeah.
Okay. I think that, like you said, there's a problem with the T interp, and I don't think that the turns have any uniqueness. I don't think they could collapse to them. So most of the time should probably be spent on the K. They said they're condo, so you should probably read condo, but I think the big weakness of the K, let me read it again one more time. But one is that I think they can't really claim solvency for their impacts unless they're like, yeah, I think that like the way that the K is written feels kind of older to me. Like I don't
Definitely.
think it's definitely an older an older style. Because I just don't think that they can one solve for a lot of the impacts that they're reading. I don't think that anyone would use radical feminism as the alt today. I would hope not. There's some issues there. I think that that's a potential place to read disads. I don't know if Dallas is going to do that, but I think the perm probably does function here. There isn't a lot of explicit links for like what the AF is doing beyond the fact that like warfare is bad, but those would link to any topical AF to the same extent that it would link to the affirmative. So there's not really an explanation of what the affirmative is doing that's like especially like masculine beyond like talking about hegemony, which I think that you can justify why like talking about hegemony is fine as long as you're not like promoting like the domination of other states.
Yeah, and obviously we have like 3 or 4 sentences in the PMC that are like, it's about switching from offensive to defensive. It's about switching from preemptive to retaliatory or whatever.
Yeah, which I don't think that there's a lot of interaction with. So I think that should be fine.
All right, let's see what Dallas does.
That they're like, you literally just don't have an impact.
Awesome. I'm gonna go advantage 1, advantage 2. Yeah, I will. Okay, it's gonna be top penalty.
Oh, I guess I should have guessed. I mean, now we know the order, but I should have guessed the order.
What's your guess? Because it takes her forever to get through this if I don't.
Oh, okay. My guess would be T, case, K, but framework before the K.
Where do you have condo?
Oh, sorry, condo's on the K. Usually I just have it on the K.
Okay, cool. Yeah, all right, cool. Let's see.
Yeah, because in LD you usually just read it as an LD.
That makes sense.
My bad.
Honestly,
Cool. I just want to make sure I'm not missing the order.
yeah. So the turns are going to be at the very bottom of the order. So it's going to be advantage 1, advantage 2 after topicality.
T.
Then it will be a new sheet. It will be a new sheet.
The condo cops.
Yeah. And then it will be the criticism.
What order?
It'll in the order of the alternative. Then it will be the framework of the app, and then the framework of the neg.
What's up?
Oh, I was just guessing the rest of the order of it. So then it'll be links, then impacts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we read all framework links impacts too for sure, especially when we read
links and
preemptive framework. Sorry.
Yeah, I promise I will signpost. This is like one of the first times I wrote the grade on the rules. So.
I feel like I got it. I feel like I got the order right.
Turns on the bottom.
And then the turns
I
on
guessed it.
Sweet.
So the terms I have from truckle grandstand to the bottom of that, which is redirects.
Yeah, the only thing is she put their turns on a separate sheet instead of just on the case debate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just had it on case.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's where I would have had it too.
Can I just confirm?
Yes, correct. Yes.
T.
Uh-huh.
Advantage 1, advantage 2.
I was wrong. I shouldn't have interrupted. Shut up, Paul.
No, you're correct. T, advantage 1, advantage 2.
Then new sheet.
Then new sheet.
Ah.
St. Paul.
Oh.
This is why there's dance sport.
Your framework, their framework.
And then the case turns on bottom with the trunk and grandstand.
What did she say to you? This is what they would?
This is the Jansport thing.
Oh.
Because this is the year that I had her post that picture of the JanSport backpack during part of the picture. It's so funny. Again, it's all you're always farming. The kids these days would call it aura, but back then, you know, it was like rap. It was, you know, people like.
She aura farmed you.
Got it.
Nailed it.
How do you have hair?
Alright. First of the week, we talk about cyber warfare between China and Russia, even though we are in active war against a country next to counter-interpretation cyber warfare. Action by a nation-state or a non-state actor to penetrate nations, computers, or networks for the purpose of causing damage or disruption. Repeat, action by a nation-state or a non-state actor to penetrate nations, computers, or networks for the purpose of causing damage or disruption. This is from the DoD for the 2017 report on cybersecurity. We need this interpretation because we were discussing about the question of non-state actors versus state actors. Next year, interpretation data because you don't preclude the ability for non-state actors who have the technologies also means that you are a form of invisible violence in denies the individual's relationships to these kind of technologies. We see that individuals like ISIS already have technology, meaning that we should be able to talk about them, but as well, you can cross by this too. Their creativity seeming extra reason for one field context today. DoD being able to talk DoD definitions give me much better for field context and what we're able to actually articulate this actually talk about in U.S. federal government methods, but this also means that this turns out your grand and limit standards and where we are better for analysts to actually say and brand terms that as it says of what potential abuses like voting a potential dissent that exist in debate, you always vote negative and actually debate face next today. We say for scheme creativity because you overlimit the affirmative in a world where you're able to actually engage with the DoD talks about this actually topic literature, say field context factor, check factor, this is no spill over, ununderstood argument, XPA, we should reject the argument not obtained because we have not read an argument as to how this is predicated on non-state actors and looks to the advantages literally nothing about ISIS being able to take over the world, but on the impacts you should differ with our length of reasonability, clear risk of winning interpretation or defense of students voted out, that also precludes including interpretation, so it's better for interpretation debate. Yeah.
Also, the definition doesn't even mention computers. It's just definition of warfare, not cyber warfare.
Yeah, also your definition doesn't talk about computers with the cyber part, so that's probably really bad for all of your standards. Anyway. You say you don't need the offensive mindset because they'll just go to Congress and healthcare bill 1. That's obviously we're important for being able to establish international framework, for international framework, being able to check back for offensive mindset that exists in the economic nature of the U.S. federal government. You were really charged with the next argument is how you say this will lead to World War II. It literally looks at the impact of the act. We did not talk about any nuclear war, cyber warfare in the entirety of the affirmative. The negative is the first one to bring it up. That's probably good reasons why you linked your own criticism and feeling that you have to create discussion all about nuclear havoc and hegemony that exists in the status quo movement. That is justification why the perpetrators can be able to drop the criticism not. They can across the impact. They say turn class news that Trump would be able to allocate their proper funds. This is you literally defending Trump being able to follow through with link your own criticism saying that you can defer to masculinity to be able to resolve the questions of the impacts on advantage to accept cross the entirety advantage to this goes. If Rob don't buy the war, the one claim that Grace makes me that international framework solves to ensure global security and ensure that millions of individuals do not die from access to water and poverty is probably really good. Yeah.
They can see that these countries are literally asking us to do this, so they'll definitely follow the framework. You just say that.
Yeah, exactly. Countries are asking us to do so. Next, initiate. Interpretation negative gets access to one unconditional adversary status quo, negative gets one access to one unconditional adversary status quo, be a violation, they would able to defend status quo after the affirmative bill that says a conditional, let's hold them to that. Number 1 is parliamentary policy, so what is the images the only offensive speech bill that make arguments with the next participants, someone views as strategic to you, affirmative means strategic consistency that makes me able to ensure that we have actually had access to be able to prove negative because negative will always be able to block to check the argument is broken first operation for 1, fairness is in most form access debate, question of masculinity debate, we also say, fairness is more for inclusivity, turns on inclusivity, argument number 2 is conditionality, upholds privilege, turns on masculinity claim in the world, where you literally say you're able to kick the alternative in the world where you can just justify it and walk yourself through your action. This is the reason why hegemonic action in the base space happens and why people get away with sexual assault in the base space because they say they can just pretend it never happened. Yeah.
Question?
Yeah.
Can we get the text of that enter?
Negative is entitled to 1 unconditional advocacy or the status quo. I'm going to add to that from the LOC. Okay.
I'm pausing that time.
Another thing that I think shows the age of the video is no one's read content warning theory.
Mhm.
I feel like if
Yes,
this,
has not happened.
that would have been read certainly.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
another-
I had not seen that in
relevant
Parley
content.
until the next year.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, at Mile High. So yeah.
I was like, certainly someone would read it if either of these were read now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We're not, okay. Also, this comes before topicality and more where we say the questions up in round engagement are always predicated before the question we said would happen to topicality on. The alternative first argument, per occasion, vote act and write on the ballot a commitment to building critical feminist alliances. Vote affirmative and write on the ballot a commitment to building critical feminist alliances. So funny is that we say inclusivity by being able to articulate the way
Isn't that intrinsic?
It's intentionally intrinsic.
Okay, so it's like
Yes.
bait, or
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the thing that I've talked about before that like is not ideal, but like it's basically one of those arguments where if they don't answer it, we're gonna win the debate. It's really easy to answer, but if they don't answer it, we'll win the debate. So let's see if they answer it or not. Like, because not only is that intrinsic, it's severance. That did not even include the plan. It literally just said vote af to blah 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 blah. It doesn't even say like do the plan, blah, any of that stuff, right? It's just yeah, very cheatery. But it's crazy that you got that, Tanya. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Critical feminist life, so many so we are allowed to work synthesis of ideology being able to combine the way that the US federal government will always exist cross-play the articulation on offering which will get to in a second is how state structures are inevitable, means only question of how we articulate our relationship. That means that we have to be able to form alliances to these group structures in order to be able to interrogate about parts of that. So maybe is that we say we preclude fluidity, we say the dichotomy is the alternative versus the affirmative is the reason is why feminist alliances cannot exist in the first place, meaning that reproduction is the only method by which we can intersectional attributes. You don't solve the affirmative world where group structures are always going to be inevitable. The question that feminist alliance is not going to solve for freaking detoxing people.
I'm pausing. Sorry, I saw your hand, Tanya. I just was trying to wait till she finished.
Yeah. I think that the state's inevitable stuff would make more sense as being the underview than the like fiat stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking like when it does make sense to have framework in as an underview, and I think like if you are reading it, it has to be something that would apply no matter what. And I think that
Yes.
like defending util, defending like policy making would make more sense in the underview than like talking about like whether fiat is illusory or even like giving a roll of the ballot because you don't really know what you want until you hear what the K is.
Yeah, totally.
So I think this stuff being in the PMC would have been better, and then like reading that stuff later on,
Yeah.
like flipping them would have been good.
Sure.
It's always going to be a question of the authority being able to resolve these kinds of questions. But next is that realism is inevitable. Stakes of the state structures in pausing domestic affairs are always going to exist. Meaning that feminist alliances have to exist within the state structures, not the debate space, but also number 3 is that superstructures affect into the debate space. Meaning that reproduction is key to be able to resolve the questions of feminist alliances, how superstructures have affected us in our apprentices. This is like the Title IX trend before that happened before the debate tournament. But we also say that this means that your inevitable alliance with the cooperative or you're going to say Angela Davis says too. Meaning that's the reason why the Black Panther Party collapsed, or world where individuals were precluding your relationship to the state. Meaning that the persecution will resolve this by you were precluding pollution and destroy intersectionality. Next, you don't solve the affirmative because you say the methodology of the affirmative is constant aggression. Look to the impact of that. We literally are not constant aggression. We preempted this in prep. We knew they were going to read some patriarchal militarism. That's why we didn't read the impacts of nuclear war, y'all. We are not an aggressive action. The act is defensive. Affirmative. You say your method is normative debate. You don't tell me what a normative debate is. You say there is no normative kind of debate. You'll be able to pause that as the reason why masculinity exists in the first place. You say that there is one kind of debate that exists in the status quo. We say there are an infinite number of relationships in debate that the affirmative is able to say that you say power grid's not proximal. I don't know. There's electricity in this room, y'all. We're all using the dance, but next time you say your ethics bad, say your ethics really good in the world of you. Drop case that MBO's 2 next day that masculinity and we were masculine because we're talking about magnitude. No, we talked about just how many people would be affected by these kinds of instances. You say you're proximal. I'm on my framework. You say we're proximal because we criticize debate. We're in debate. Paul and I agree with the solution, but the way that we talk about it in debate means basically we've actually arguments on the framework. Most of our framework, students, your framework, you say in round is key. We say that the way that we talk about superstructures in round is fine. You say vote team the best, blah blah blah. The vote for team argument, the role of ballot. You like to the criticism because we say ballot grabs are the only way that inclusivity can be destroyed in the debate space where individuals are forced to appreciate the dichotomy and destroying the ability for teams to work together. The ballot grab, the negative is the reason why patriarchy exists in the debate space. Also exists today. Formally and washing leads to infinite structural violence where the individual can say that they acknowledge the wrongness of it, but continue to do it anyways. You say that there's a spill over debate. We say that absolutely the affirmative is able to resolve this imperfection. Also, we say that there are efficient ways that individuals, especially non-binary fellow women, can talk about their relationship with the government. Is a good reason that's why you really for one like for healing for the criticism because we say that you are for masculine debate or you're us by the bad articulation if we have the ability to, that.
Okay, yeah, so at the end, she's basically just like, again, kind of what we pointed out, like, there's no warrant for this. Like, what is the uniqueness on this thing? Like, why would this be a thing that can happen? Feelings post-MG. Like, where do you think the MO is going? Like, what's your expectation? Or, like, what do you think maybe poorly covered or whatever?
I think that, and I don't know if this is like a norm at the time. I think that more perms probably should have been read instead of just the one, but I don't know if that was like
There was a second one. I think that it just started, like, I think it was right when I started. The second one's like an actual perm, basically. That's like whatever. But yeah, it was like, I think the second after we started the video, so you might not caught it. Yeah, there was two perms. There's one that's just giga intrinsic, and then a second one that's like playing an all-out competitive part or something. It comes up.
I see. Okay, yeah. Then I guess if I was the LO, I would
Or
probably...
MO, you mean?
Oh, sorry, MO. Yeah. Well, I guess the LO, yeah. You're not splitting the block, so the LO would be doing it as well. But if I was the MO, I don't think I would go for T. I don't think I would go for these turns. I don't know that either of them are super viable strats even before the MG. So I don't know that I would be like looking to go for them. The K would probably be the way to go. I think that as far as stuff that was undercovered, I think there would certainly need, I think there is a debate to be had on whether the AF is defensive or not. And that probably is a debate that would need to happen. I don't know that I would, I don't know if there's anything that's especially undercovered other than I guess maybe the alt itself.
Yeah.
Like I think on framework and the links, everything is fine. I think the alt is a little like.
Yeah, there's really just like the alt doesn't solve and that's it.
Yeah, and then the perm, and then that's it. And then condo.
So context, as they mentioned, they call us the condo cops. Specific to condo team, we're the most condo team of all time. Like we read condo bad and won on condo bad probably more than any other team ever in Parley. Like legitimately. And so it is important to have that knowledge and to know that we all know each other. We've all debated a bunch of times. We're from the same region. We all came up together. Like this team knows we will go for condo if we can go for condo. And that ends up informing a lot of the MO that's about to
Hello. All right. If I could get this in damn order. Okay. T on top. Maybe. T. Condo. You're gonna want some room on condo. Links.
Of the criticism.
Yeah, links and impacts of the criticism.
This is the longest order of all time. I was feeling that in the room. I was like, this guy's bad. Crap that.
Frame of the bottom, or do you want the framework on top of the alt? Alright, alt and then framework. There'll be comparison of frameworks between app and neg, so I'm going to talk about the neg framework first and then talk about the app framework.
Sorry, did I miss what case was that?
I'm going to probably talk about it at the bottom.
Now let's pause real quick. The MO just said, because I asked worst case, did I miss case? And he goes, if I have time, I'll talk about it. Not a winning strategy in general. Okay, it just as a rule of thumb. Unless they're only going for T, almost certainly not a winning strategy, right? Like, I mean, if the app gets an unmitigated case, it's so hard for you to win your K unless you just frame them out completely. And like, I don't know that they did enough in this debate to do that, just having what we've heard so far. So I'm pretty stoked over there at this point. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, the one part that we didn't have good answers on, really. I was like, what, just we answered like the last 10 seconds. Good stuff.
We'll see.
Okay.
You even hear Dallas like, okay.
across the way, there's not going to be any particular reason why you're going to be voting for the affirmative this particular way, other than the argument about how our interpretation leads to principal violence or articulation that you're going to be voting the alternative, and to resolve this into how we can resolve the kind of invisible violence that happens in space.
Also, the invisible violence against non-state actors already occurred.
I can say invisible violence against non-state actors already occurs, which means that there's a terminal assault to this particular thing, but additionally there's no impact on this argument, which means that you're never going to be violating this. But secondarily, you're going to be violating the reasonability claims on conditionality, which is probably a reason why it should be extended across reasonability on the condo show. Next on condo, the first.
Also, never vote on an RBI. It's just
Next argument, you're never going to be voting on an RBI for the affirmative in this instance. You're going to be voting on an RBI for the negative.
Any guesses on who the brains was in this partnership, Tanya? Just based on Grace's prompts so far. But what's up? What's up? You're muted.
Do you think reasonability works as a paradigm on condo? I'm not sure.
So glad you asked that question, Tanya. I don't. There's no such thing as being reasonably condo, and like I think that you either are or you aren't is like the first level of that. I think, is there like a reasonable form of condo? Absolutely, but that's borne out in the standards debate. Like, you want that, in my opinion, to be a competing interpretation debate. But this is definitely a thing from this era. It's still kind of a thing these days, right? Where like if someone says reasonability or competing interpretations on a theory sheet, and there's another theory sheet in the debate that's against you, you take whatever they said. So because like just sort of gives you credence on like, well, they said we get it here, but like obviously someone smart who was going for condo would be like, that's not how this works. They're two completely different things. So yeah, I don't think it works. Yeah.
Next argument on the condo. The first argument that we were on condo in round 6. The second argument is that they do not define what condo is. They do not actually.
Pause. I'm gonna lose my mind. This was a real thing, Tanya. This was a real thing. Did you hear that first? We meet. We were condo in round 6. Your interp didn't specify what round. Grow up, Daniel. Anyone who makes arguments like this was a thing. I don't know why this happened, but like the NPTE the week before this, people's interns would be like, in the 4th round of the 2018 NPTE, blah, 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 blah. It's because I think they were trying to get out of, like, model of debate stuff and be like, we're not defending a model of debate. We're saying in this round, here's why, or whatever, right? This comes up in the semis round of NPTE. We're not in that round. But this team's reading a conspiracy theory K on, like, the AF, and Washburn reads a theory show like that, where in semis of NPTE, whatever, and Boise comes up and goes, this isn't 2017. The Gregorian calendar was changed, and so that's actually a conspiracy. It's just the wackest thing in the world. Hate it, not good. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's bad. Terrible we meet. Waste of time. Going on. Or do you have something to say, Tanya? Okay, go.
This does not work for themselves or by consumption of all economies. We do not even say that we're conditional in this round. We would argue that we have a defense of the status quo. Third argument is that we need, but
Wait, it's not a defense of the status quo.
we reserve the right to defend the status.
You see me literally be like, what is this? Is like that's literally what they said.
So is our articulation. Y'all putting words in our mouths, like yo.
Grace starts saying
this position is never conditional. We never change the position, so if we just decide whether or not to go for the position of this round, the 4th argument is the counter-interpretation. The affirmative must define what the conditionality is. The affirmative must define what conditionality is. The next violation, they do not define what conditionality is. The standard is going to be the predictable ground, and by creating an affirmative strategy, they need to be able to know what you actually have to establish what it means to actually be conditional around it. Or to neg on MG theory, and this specifically because it's going to be it's impossible to win because of no backside rules. The 7 arguments of non-union position is conditionality, including the PMC they can kick out of a which means that every single argument that happens in the base space is already conditionally. 8 is the argument on the affirmative. The affirmative case conditionality with running MG theory because they can go for the MG theory and the B-bar, which means that they are functionally making the PMC going to be conditional in this space. The 9 arguments that we meet that we are dispositional in this round. The 10th argument is that the breath is going to be better than death. Literally is the plan to focus around the negative is taken away. The argument here is that we need to be able to actually check the kind of affirmative through the alternative also, the second argument that there are going to be no violation in this instance because we're going to be going for the alternative, which means that you can always evaluate the alternative in the space. Next argument they talk about. The last argument. If the argument is going to be good debate, our argument is that by spreading yourself out to Dallas, it's always going to be impossible for you to ever access this particular space because the argument no. Cross out that argument.
There's a lot of things. This is not going. They're just so afraid we're going for condo. They've thrown like their 11th or 10th argument on condo, and he tries to start saying like Dallas is too fast. Like Dallas is too fast, so we need to be condo. But then Grace is trying to stop Daniel because like Grace is like Kay had a block about how like women in debate are forced to debate in like a masculine norm, and then like they get it from both sides basically. And now he's like biting into that and trying to save himself and walk it back. And again, if you probably I'm just literally going like this in the room, just like what is happening? Okay.
That's a wrong argument.
This doesn't turn inclusivity. Having different negative strategies is key. You telling us what we can and can't read in the LOC is probably going to push.
Telling what Grace can and cannot read in the LOC is always going to be reading into the position that we're reading in the system, which means that there's independent link. That means that the permutation cannot resolve this because they're functionally having a rule of the debate space in this instance text argument on the standards themselves. The first argument is not strategy. We are going for the accuracy, which means that it's not strategy in this instance. But next argument on the voter, they talk about how this is going to be turning inclusivity. But I've already answered this argument. They talk about how we could kick the alternative. We're not kicking the alternative. But they talk about how this. Sure, conduct comes before T.
The only abuse that would happen is all of the new arguments in the PMR. Every single goal.
The only abuse that happens in this round is going to be all the new arguments in the PMR, which means because we have no access to backside rules, which means that the negative would always lose in these kinds of debates, which is particularly bad for the debate space. Next on the links. Sure.
Yeah, you said you dispo. Can you explain that a little bit more?
We reserve the right to defend the status quo.
That's
Links.
technically the definition of dispositional. Anyways, go.
Links. Not addressing the fourth link, which has specific links to your affirmative, is going to be damning because if we're making an indictment of your
I'm pausing right
permutation-
here. I am not flowing this debate because this was the same thing we did last time. Obviously, I was also in this debate. I've flown it before. Tanya, can you tell me, to the degree that you have it, what do you have down as the fourth link of the K?
Sure.
If you have a fourth link down.
Okay. I have big rules ruled by masculinity. Connor double blind. Let's see. Is that the we're complicit in normative? I just have complicit.
I have no idea. So we're
don't
gonna listen to what he says, and you tell me if this is a thing on your flow in that general area. But let's go.
It always has a residual link that cannot be resolved by the permutation, which means that the fourth link, which has which has four subpoints under it, means that you always are going to be evaluating this first. All of Dallas's arguments at the link level are non-responsive to the specificity of the links about using the United States federal government or the necessary cyber warfare that happens within the topic, but secondarily that the kind of cyber hackers are always pushed out of the NSA. Only 5% of the entirety of the NSA is women, and less than 2% of those are actually hackers within the NSA.
This is important. This is new.
Yeah, this is definitely new. They have the gamer stuff, but they
Yes.
don't have the hacker stuff.
Yeah, they say like women hackers pushed out, whatever, right? Like they whatever as a version of the game thing. There's no warrant, like there's just no specificity.
no
to
NSA
anything.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
exactly. Okay, cool.
NSA, which body an indication that we are winning about inclusivity arguments if we have any kind of solvency and spillover effect in this round. But the next argument, they talk about how new link to masculinity debate. This is not responsive to the second link, which talks about how women are caught in double blind and how they have to perform masculinity debate in order to be successful. Literally, Gracie, it's called the B word, which I'm allowed to repeat, but in rounds in which she is considered to be too masculine, these debates, this is what happens constantly in debate. And that I'll get you the bottom of that. This is the argument that continually happens. They're caught in a double blind. I will get you the bottom.
Thank you.
But the next argument.
Argument is that anyone can perform any part of the gender spectrum. We just have to look at how,
Our argument is that anyone can perform any part of the gender spectrum. We need to have an ontological shift in how we approach these kind of gender spectrum, which is key through the alternative and building a critical feminist alliance. This is how the alternative uniquely resolves these types of links, which leads us to the impacts in this debate, which is that we can resolve the kind of sexual assault that continually happens in this community because we are normalizing these things by voting for this kind of permutation, but secondarily that the militarism of the affirmative is never going to be resolved.
Just a crazy argument, right? Just a crazy argument that these kinds of affirmatives are what's driving sexual assault in the debate space. But here we are.
Because the military is particularly bad, especially in the context of cyber warfare and the lack of women individuals who are in the NSA or in any kind of security. But secondly, the fourth argument is...
On the impact.
What do you want me to extend?
Extend across the impacts, they can't solve for the debate round or the feminine flight from the activity means that we have...
Except across the impacts, which means that they can never solve for the feminine flight from the activity. Also, the what?
The militarism impact.
Oh, and also the militarism impact, which turns the case, which means that we're running a unique link and impact. You can do. Then we are always going to...
Tanya, is there? Maybe I'm wrong, and again, because it's different when you're not flying, but I don't even remember there being a militarism impact. I remember her starting on case by saying, "You're literally militarism." Is there an impact that is explicit militarism that I'm just not remembering off the top of my head?
There is stuff about sexual assault in the military.
Yeah, that I remember. But obviously this sounds different than. But yeah, okay.
And then yeah, the like you're literally militarism stuff on framework. Maybe if they're cross applying the like maybe they're cross applying the Trump stuff now is like
Sure.
that's militarist or maybe we're missing something, but I don't have
Yeah.
I have the sexual assault in the military stuff.
Cool. Well, not cool. Bad. Terrible.
Winning on the case level debate, which allows for individuals to be harmed. Alternative? What do you want me to say here? On the premise? Just
First one's intrinsic.
Oh, yeah, you're right. The first permutation to be intrinsic for in the debate space, but secondarily that they're independent just as to this permutation through the link level to be in the affirmative is a bad idea through the link level and the impact level of the criticism. Then you're ever going to be inviting the permutation because it includes the affirmative, which would necessarily have individual disadvantages to it, but secondarily they talk about inclusivity, which means that we need to include the affirmative. No, we are critiquing the way that the affirmative was structured in the first place, which means that we need to necessarily have these kinds of debates about the debate space, but secondarily the next argument to perm to the plan and commitment to critical feminist lines of this shift. This is a rhetorical shift from the PMC and how it was framed, which is an indication that they are not, first off, they're not genuine to the critical feminist line. They're only doing it to win the ballot, which turn the ballot commodification argument. But secondarily, but the affirmative is always going to be allowing this. I'm sorry, I just don't have time. I really don't because I have a really dry throat. I'm sorry. Thank you. But the next argument that solvency.
Answer that all of our arguments on case are indicative of the status quo, that like masculinity.
All of our arguments on case are indicative of the status quo, and not necessarily how women are pushed out of the United States federal government already. But the only argument that they go for on the alternative place is realism.
I'm gonna pause there. He misunderstood what Grace said. Grace said, "Answer that all of our arguments are indicative of the status quo," but now he is saying all of our arguments link to the status quo, which is obviously the opposite of what we want there. So not ideal. And that's obviously what Tanya pointed out earlier, right? It's like all these turns are like these are all squo for sure.
Yes, realism is necessarily inevitable in the state structure, but we are arguing that the debate space is not realistic, not inevitable in this space because we have an ability to actually have kind of pedagogical talks about what we can do to be able to change the world, which means that the alternative is critical to having this. And just when we have six arguments, but the one that I really need is the sixth argument about how we can solve the affirmative, because the combative nature of the affirmative means that we need to be able to have a kind of critical feminist alliance in order to actually resolve the impacts of this affirmative. Case.
This escalates aggression.
Yep. The first argument that I need to go for is that these only escalates the amount of aggression that happens because we are taking reactionary policy, which means that the amount of countries and non-state actors would only be willing to only commit more cyber attacks, which means that there's a terminal term to both the advantage about the kind of spillover effect, but secondly that they have literally not reading any solvency about how they're actually going to be leading to this kind of spillover effect in the first place. Why would countries not attack us if we have a reactive policy? Doesn't make sense. They're not reading specific.
That's like the AF. Like that's like every.
I also feel like is that not like if you're going for the K, I feel like you shouldn't say that.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird that we're having case discussions.
That is a fairly realist thing to say.
It also just makes sense in a world where like they're like we're going for the alt, and now they're like, but squirrel good. So I don't know.
Solvency about why that would make sense.
All right, now we'll see Grace clean it up. Oh, sorry, you want me to pause, Tanya?
No, I'm just stuck on why would they not attack us if we did like that is realism. It sounds like it's inevitable.
100%, yeah. Well, and the thing is, he even said it, like he says like realism is inevitable, not in the debate space, but like I don't know what that means. If realism is inevitable, that seems really good for the AF. I guess is the takeaway. Play.
Alrighty, it's going to be an overview, and then it's going to be a discussion about case, a discussion about the frameworks, and then the case, and then the criticism in order.
Framework, case, K, is that what you said?
Yeah. conditionality bad at the point that we are not conditional and we weren't defending conditionality in other rounds. Their interpretation needs to be more specific if they're going to go for this in the PMR. But additionally, any arguments that come out of Paul's mouth are going to be new and will be golden turds, which means that we never get our initial response, which means that that would be the most abusive thing in the round. Means that every single new argument is an independent reason to vote against them because we never have a chance to respond. It is a bad ethic of debating to run NG theory. It is a bad way to push out teams to never give another response and to silence individuals in the block, which means that you should not be voting.
I don't know if you saw my eyes going like, okay.
Then I'm confused why they read MO theory. Did they not read new?
That's a whole weird thing that happens in this debate, but like goes away. So the MO theory that they read, as far as I'm aware, never actually has impacts. And so when I heard it as like
the interprets even it starts off as a counter interpretation, but then it's like
yes.
But then there's a violation. Like I was
it's
very confused by this.
It was a very weird thing. Yeah. Upon rewatching this, I remember when I was in this round live, I was like, was that a turn? Okay, well, there's no impact, so I don't care. But yeah, he honestly,
that like opens you up to so many golden turns. Like that's like if you're worried about golden turns,
not great.
That's the worst thing to do. Yeah.
And this is a conversation, for students out there in general that we've definitely talked to kids about too, which is like, if you think you're winning the debate, there's no reason pretty much ever to read a new sheet. Like if you're just gonna win the debate, like adding a new sheet that you're like, especially in Parley where you don't get backsider bubbles or anything, like not a great choice. Like we read Kondo because we were trying to get them baited on Kondo, right? And like, obviously it was advantageous for us. And based on Daniel's speech, he spent like 3+ minutes on Kondo, so it was solid, right? But like, I don't know what his thought process was with what he was trying to do.
For this, additionally, we're just going to be winning the standards debate at the point that Daniel articulates it. Also, they would have to answer all 4 we needs and the counter interpretation, and why that doesn't resolve all of the standards means that you shouldn't be voting on this. And it's their only out. So, case. You don't get the relink to any of the arguments because we are literally talking about the masculinity and the status quo. The problem with your case is the problem of the way that we need to approach masculinity right now, and the way that we endorse it, the way that Trump is right now is a problem and indicative of hyper masculinity. The aggression that turns the entirety of your case is why you can never resolve any of this and why the criticism is the only chance to resolve any of it. You don't answer any of this. You just say that Trump can't control it because of DOD. That does not matter. It also is not true. You are not responding to the warrants about how Trump controls everything and targets Republicans and pushes them out, which means that he would be able to control all the entirety of the war scenario. You don't respond to the fact that he isn't an all-powerful president right now, unfortunately.
None of this in the MO. Kind of in the LOC, none of it in the MO.
Which means that he could just perpetuate all of the war scenarios. Additionally, you don't extend your advantage to, and there's not a proximal impact on it. You just talk about India means that is not actually.
They said we don't extend advantage to. Dallas explicitly says they dropped advantage to extend that.
Proximal, and you're going to be winning your framework, but also literally your MG answer is 5 pillars don't work. Exactly. Your new pillar is not going to solve. You have a terminally.
Sorry.
Did you have something to say? Sorry, just.
Oh no.
Okay, cool.
Back a little bit. The articulation that the impact about India and other countries is not proximal, I think, is a new analysis of why we don't operate under a certain framework.
All over the framework, we said that their impacts are not proximal. In the LOC, I said that their impacts on Advantage 2 and Advantage 1 are not proximal to the debate space. This is an extension of that. These arguments are in the debate. I am just weighing arguments. Under consideration. That means that you don't have any arguments that win within your framework, which means that you're always going to be voting for the criticism. It doesn't matter if realism is inevitable. That is exactly what we're critiquing. We have to build coalitions within it. This is our argument from the start, which means that 1, you don't have a unique impact, and 2, you don't have a fat case, which means that
It definitely does matter if imperialism is inevitable or not. So just like general rule of thumb, folks, like if the app says something is inevitable and you're the K team, you can't let them win that. It's inevitable, pretty much ever.
even if you buy all of the articulation, all of the critique, they can't win. Also, probably the reason why Kondo isn't really bad because we still straight turned your case.
They're so convinced we're going for Kondo.
Like problem with it. Anyways, and we're going for the critique frameworks. They never answered the argument that their policy never actually happens. We have to look at the way that we endorse policies in the debate space and how that actually affects the debate space, which means that you don't actually get impacts within the framework, which means that you are essentially framed out of the round. The only impacts that matter is the sexual assault that we could potentially solve through militarism, but also you don't answer our spillover arguments about how this would be able to spill over to future generations of debate and actually make it a more inclusive space, which means that we are just going to be winning this.
Not in the end.
On the links. We check back for all of their fluidity arguments at the point that they are conceding that we are intersectional and we can solve for multiple forms of repression, but additionally that gender fluidity is a part of our argument, which means that you don't get a link, but also they're just going to go for the masculinity in the debate.
Intersectionality as an answer to fluidity is completely new.
On the links.
I am using an argument on the solvency point to show how that interacts with an argument on the link point, which means the argument I am extending is in the LOC and in the MO, and this is just simply explaining the interaction, which is what the rebuttals get to do.
Did you have a feeling on that point of order, Tanya?
Let me double check my flow. So
Also, I don't even know, while you're doing that, I don't know if you've ever even brought this up, but for those of you who don't do parley, in parley, if you think someone is making a new argument in the rebuttal, you can call a point of order, and it basically stops their speech, and then you say, here's the new argument I think they made, and then they say, no, that wasn't it. Obviously, we don't have backside rebuttals and that kind of stuff, and so we have to have some sort of mechanism for checking that.
I do have on the gender fluidity stuff that critical feminist alliance is how we resolve. So I think I would allow it.
I'm sure it's under consideration.
Means that the argument from the show already preempted all of your arguments, but additionally, you don't get to say that we're just relinking into masculinity, because this is the second link is that women are always caught in the double bind, is that we have nowhere to go in debate. You say that I'm performing masculinity in my LOC, which is why I can't have my position. That is just creating a double bind where we always tell women that they have to be masculine to win debates, but then they can't be masculine they can't be masculine whatsoever. Also, this double bind, this double bind also applies to their argument about ballot grabs, saying that being competitive and wanting to win is necessarily something that women can't do if we're going to defend femininity. That is absurd. You're basically saying that you can't be feminine and also look for the ballot, and you can't critique masculinity and also want to win. That just recreates the second link, which means that your permutation can never resolve. But additionally, you concede the entirety of the links to your militarism, and the fact that you defend the military and the cyber warfare means we have a conceded link, which is the reason why none of your permutations are going to resolve this. Also, on the alternative, you don't have net benefits. You literally don't read a net benefit to either of your permutations.
This shocks me because Dallas, you literally, look at me, Tanya, look what I am doing as she's saying this.
You don't have a single impact to actually go for.
Because Dallas read like 3 net benefits to the second permutation.
But additionally, the realism inevitable doesn't actually matter, and they are conceding that we can resolve the affirmative because the aggressive action that's being taken in the Trump's action can't actually be resolved through coalition building, which means we have solvency for the alternative. But additionally, any residual link means that you only recreate the impacts of the criticism, which means that this would outweigh anything on case, especially when you're not winning the framework arguments that say that you get access to your impacts. You don't have access to your impacts, and we turn your case, which means that the only way to resolve it is through the alternative.
Gonna be what? Oh, yes.
I'm gonna pause. Go ahead. Sorry, I should have asked. I thought I asked the question. I did not. What do you think the PMR is gonna be?
The perm.
You might be right. You might be
Right.
Okay, cool. Check it out.
It's gonna be condo.
That's gonna be turns on the MO theory. It's gonna be entirely new.
Our framework. Then the
MO theory bad.
Demo theory is bad.
framework and impacts of their bases. Anyone need that down?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be the condo sheet, add 1, add 2. Oh, yeah, sorry, the Trump stuff should be underneath. So it'll be the case in order after condo, and then it will be our framework, then it will be their alternative, their links, their framework, their impacts.
So what is the NEG framework?
The NAID framework comes right before the impacts. You are voting affirmative to reorient the militarism of the United States, i.e. that to change from one of a proactive and offensive attacks to a question of retaliatory attacks and the ability to be not allowing for the proliferation that occurs in other nations as a result of the United States' presence. I want you to comment now. On condo, there's no RBI on this, we're not going for it, whatever. Go to advantage.
Devastating.
On advantage 1, you are not responding to any specificity. We say right now that the United States in the status quo is a question of an offensive and masculine norm, i.e. that we are a question of being resolved. As you can see all the analysis as to how we reorient the system, as looking at all the link analysis, we say that this is a question of the impacts, i.e. the impacts are a question of things in the power group, which you consider proximal because there's electricity in this goddamn room and we all necessarily depend upon it. Additionally, it's a question of how we ethically orient to each other when you battle the question of the impacts. But additionally, you can see like the map analysis that says that countries will do this, which means we would solve for them too, which will matter on advantage 2. Advantage 2 did not have a goddamn answer. This is an articulation that probably win this question. The only argument we had in LC was that none of the models, which you can see level analysis, as to Pakistan and India are literally asking for students and further, which means they necessarily would model this. In addition to all the questions about this is how math works now. I.e., not to nuke you in the first place, which means that no one tries to nuke us in the first place. It is proven to work in the status quo, which means we resolve the impacts, which prevents countries like India from having a devastating effect on the billions of people who rely upon the various infrastructure projects that exist there now. So, case should probably be a good ethic when you go to friendly stuff. Yeah. The only argument they really have an answer to the question of Trump being able to grant saying you have related your own criticism of the word saying that Trump simply be able to use is masculine attacks in order to be able to use that. It's the exact logic of the status quo in which you try to critique, but anything goes wrong there, right? So cool, great. So,
this was a whole. This is the thing I dwell on when I think of this round. I had no idea why Dallas wanted me to bother answering this Trump thing. Like in my head, I'm like, this is so not relevant. Like we just win the perm, we're gonna win the debate. Like they're not really going for the Trump argument at the end of the debate. They're going for the alternative and stuff. And so, like, I literally had nothing to say against it because I'm like, I wasn't even gonna deal with that because why would I? And so I go, you relate to the K because like, Dallas kind of mentioned that, and like, you said Trump's the man, and like, it's it lives in my head rent free.
I think our framework is wholeheartedly conceded this round. We are saying that it's a question not of how the fiat actually happens, but it's a question of valuing the worldview. I that if we are key to reorienting towards the other that is necessarily good. We've also won the net benefits are a way for you to evaluate ethical determination, which means that if we have a benefit of saving millions of people or billions of people dying, that you would necessarily always refer us on this question. But go to the alternative debate. The perm 2 is absolutely fire on this question. Now that is to do the plan as a commitment to the form of feminism that necessarily talked about. But you conceded all the net benefits. They literally say we don't have them. Look to the first argument. That is the question of laboratory synthesis. Society ability to be able to provide the state apparatus with the critical laws that you've created, allowing us to have a synthesis of idea and constantly be reevaluated in the state. That the state functions as right now. Additionally, you conceded this that we necessarily said that you preclude validity in the world. You literally exclude us. Last I checked, their solvency was that they would allow everyone to do this. Anybody can engage in this, but for some reason, the affirmative is not allowed to do this. This is the exact notion that we have been critiquing from the very start in the world, where you exclude people, you're not able to solve for any of the arguments. All of your arguments about how women are excluded in debate and excluded in the NSA probably have nothing to do with us in the world, where you seek to exclude us as of right now. Which means, you can always vote on this question, but initially go to the relative inevitable argument. That's probably good because you can see the analysis as to how we have to work within state structures and able to be able to change the state structures. But the analysis of everything that we've already provided on this question. But additionally, and finally, you've conceded the co-optation argument. We literally read Angela Davis against Bell Hooks, where she specifically says that the absolutely willing to work with the state, things like the Black Panther Party collapse, which means there is no risk of solvency for the alternative. Which means, since this isn't intrinsic and this isn't severance, and the act has a good ethic, i.e. being able to save lives and are proximal, that is definitely a good reason to vote for us, yes?
Answer the rhetorical shift argument.
This is a rhetorical shift. I think we've been pretty clear from the start, y'all. We don't want to have an offensive mindset. We are not trying to engage in the status quo militarism. Rather, we see that the military should be reoriented to one where instead of attacking people, we only respond with attack. That is necessarily the ethic that you've been talking about in the entire debate, which means we resolve these questions. But go to the link arguments. This analysis is new to me on this question of the NSA only being 5% women, but even so, one, that's not responsive because we're not using the NSA. We talk about how it's a question of the cyber command, which you have conceded, but additionally, if it is about the NSA, the fact that women are excluded in that space means we should definitely be talking about that institution, how it functions as right now. That is probably another reason as to why the permutation is necessarily going to be fantastic on this question. Your only argument on this is that women are necessarily forced to do this in the debate, but we see the world. Yeah, go ahead.
Trying to make a link turn on the cyber part of the link would be a new argument, considering it's the D point under the LOC shell, it's extended in the MO, it's conceded by the MG, like, it's just not answered. The NSA is a warrant. You don't get access to, like, arguments against a warrant.
I think that is a very specific and nuanced position, that the NSA specifically excludes women. That is new, which means I should be responding to that. But additionally, even if that's not true, we don't use the NSA as a
Also, I make the argument verbatim, this is the same invisibility of women in STEM, which means we should be able to talk about that.
I'm sure judges will evaluate that. But additionally, the dish out of coalitions on the alternative probably proves that we're going to be better for forming the critical alliance that you have necessarily talked about, which means you don't actually have any impact on this question. The only one you're going for is the question of being able to resolve things like sexual assault and race-based. But one reason that you would exclude individuals, i.e. us, that necessarily means that we would never have access to your form of games, which means you necessarily would not resolve this on any of the questions. But go to the framework. They didn't ditch their framework, which means they conceded Dallas's analysis. This is incredibly important. We see that you engage in the forms of masculinity that you talk about in the world where you go for a battle graph, i.e. that you necessarily commodify it and create a dichotomy, either it has to be you or us, which necessarily leads to the exact form of exclusion that we've been critiquing all about. This was fundamentally conceded, but the B subpoint of this was the question of hand washing.
Pause. It was not conceded. They did answer this. But anyway.
And this should be the most important impact of the debate. In a world where they get to say, You engage in masculinity and you lose. But they get to engage in it and exclude us and just wipe their hands from it. That is exactly what justifies the forms of sexual assault that happen now. We're always able to shift the blame and say that we are not complicit in these systems. Only by engaging with the system, recognizing our complicity, are we able to resolve that. That's why the permutation functions. That's what you have to engage with the state. And that's why we have to have a critical interrogation via a laboratory synthesis of the permutation. Thank you.
There you go. I'm waiting my turn for my hug. Where my hug at? There we go. There my hug at. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. Okay, so that was the debate. Tanya, give you a few seconds or minutes, however long you need to sort of like work out decision type stuff. I'll just keep talking so that there's not dead air. It's so interesting because the last thing that I said in the debate there about the sort of like hand washing thing, I think should have been a much bigger part of our strategy in general, right? Given the fact that like most of the debate is, I guess, in theory, about the model of debate, rather than whether the debate space has these impacts, rather than actually the militarism. Like, they're not doing a very good job, in my opinion, of leveraging the actual military type impacts. They're mostly just talking about the debate space. And I think they read this sort of like link argument that says, hey, yeah, but like women are forced to play this game, and then like when they do the masculine thing, then they get punished. It's like, well, obviously Dallas is like a woman too. But the premise being like they are very clearly going, it's not okay that we did the masculine thing, but it is okay for them, Reno, to do the masculine thing because like they had no choice then to do it. And I think that like I could have probably used in general a lot less of that PMR than I did. I think I kind of go for too many net benefits. I think that there's just not enough focusing of the like offensive reason to reject them. When I identified that they didn't have any net benefits because they literally say that, they say we don't have a net benefit, that just means they didn't flow them, and we had at least 3. So I don't know why I'm going for all of them instead of just identifying one that is core and that has the most potential sort of to generate offense against them and that sort of stuff. And so I think that is definitely somewhere that I could have done better in the debate more broadly. I think that this is an important thing as far as like knowing the people you're debating and that kind of stuff. I've mentioned this a million times on Proteus stuff. When you're going up against a team that is like legitimately just way better than you, or like is, a very solid team or whatever, being familiar with what they do is a really important part of being able to beat them. But it can also kind of be a problem, right? Because in this case, they were so in on Kondo. The LOR has like 7 arguments on Kondo. Like it starts with 30 seconds of like their only out is Kondo. When like a moment I didn't point this out, but like there's a moment where Dallas asked me before the PMR, like, "Are you going for Kondo?" And I just go, "No." like I'm just like, there's no shot, right? And so all things to consider, Tanya, you weren't a part of this debate. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I would probably vote AF here. I am buying the kind of no link argument that's being made. I buy that like the links to the debate stuff is kind of irrelevant. Like there's probably some risk that both sides are engaging in whatever it is that the negative is critiquing, and that like it is kind of arbitrary. I think that all of the negs arguments about how it's like an arbitrary distinction don't really help them, especially because all of their, at least a lot of their links do have to do with like masculine styles of debate. And if they're saying that like it's an arbitrary distinction that's like weaponized against women in debate, I think that that makes that kind of that makes their own links kind of weaker, which I think is a problem with the K from the LOC. So then I buy that it's not a rhetorical shift, that even in the 1AC or the PMC, even in the PMC, there was still like the defensive posturing as opposed to like being offensive. There's not like a combative element to the AF, which means that I think the perm probably solves. And then I buy the like inclusion arguments. So I think I would vote on the perm.
Like an hour ago, you did, I mean, obviously we've been judging a long time, you were a very successful debater, all that kind of stuff, but like you did the thing that debate is actually about, right? Which is sort of like identifying these nexus questions and like what should this debate be about, like what should be happening. And you basically said like there needs to be a discussion in this debate about whether the affirmative's posture is defensive, is masculine, etc. Like they're not really challenging us on that in any significant way, so we're not really having to beat it back. Even though we're not having to beat it back, we're not really staking out a clear enough position in the MG or the PMR. Well, I guess in the PMR there's a lot on it, but like the MG is not just like the fattest no link or link turn of all time. Just like it doesn't make any sense. And I think that this debate would be much improved if either team identified that earlier. As far as the decision, I can't remember if it was 7 judges or 5, but whatever it was a 5 or 7-0 for us. I think when I look back at this debate, the things that annoy me the most when I'm trying to like critique Paul, the young debater or whatever, is I hate how much I'm doing the like stop, slow, stop, go thing. Like just give them one, kid. Like hit the big thing and keep moving. Like there is stuff to cover in the debate. I think that I'm going for too much because I was too afraid to like just narrow the debate and pick the questions that really mattered. I definitely thought we were winning, so I was like, just gonna get there at some point. And I also think that there's, as far as the Dallas thing, I think that Dallas is on too many sheets trying to sort of like win relinks to the K that I think would be better spent elsewhere on stuff, right? Because like I don't know, guys, we're not like super worried about the K given what it is. I think the K has a lot of issues that could just be better spent identifying it, right? But like we even have like a link on like the idea of fairness is like a link to like your masculine debate tropes thing. So I think there's too much of that. As far as the U and R stuff, I think honestly the biggest issue is Daniel's time allocation on Kondo, and then they're just bad flows in this debate, which is really surprising because like they were technical debaters, but there's just no way you can watch that debate and not know that a net benefit was read to the second, like 3 net benefits were read at the second permutation, right? There's just a lot of things where they don't think we said them, or they do think they said them, and they weren't necessarily in the debate on my flow that way. What are the thoughts do you have, Tanya, before we wrap up here?
I think you kind of hit everything that I wanted to bring up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you folks enjoyed that. I guess the thing that I want to say, the kind of coming back to where we started at the beginning, right, is it is painful for me to watch rounds from my junior year. Basically, other than that one, like that one, I still have problems with. I'm like, okay, at least I debated okay here. We win the debate on a 5-0. Like I did my job. I didn't like just fluke it. But like I watched those rounds from Mile High and stuff, and I'm like, oh god, I just had no idea what I was doing, and I was in the wrong speaker positions and things like that. And I think, I guess 8 years later now, whatever it is, like 8 years later, I know how I would have coached me, like if I was my coach, and the things that I would have tried to do to break through it. But the bottom line is like, this is, so that year, I was at that exact tournament, actually, we ended up being the, number 3 or number 4 team in the country at the end. We're semifinalists. At the other nationals, I think we came in 6th. The next year we came in 4th again. But the bottom line is we were a top team in the nation at that time in parliamentary debate. And I'm still like making very bad mistakes that like now, because I have so much wealth of experience as a coach, my like students who are 1 year in don't do stuff like that, because I've noticed in me I had this problem, right? And like I have there's at least 2 students I'm working with right now, one from my school, one from a different school, who I think their problem is honestly just like a lot of shit that I did when I was a competitor, right? Where it's like, you are spinning your wheels too much. Make the next argument. Pick the right argument. Stop being a coward, blah, 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 blah. And so all that is to say, the next time we make a video and it's some high school debater, I don't care if they're your god, your goat, or whatever. I'm going to tell you why they were bad at debate. Because everyone can improve on something. That's how the game works. And even the people who win nationals win them for different reasons, right? Because they have a different skill set and everyone can improve in some area. There's like no such thing as a perfect debater. Tanya, what are your final thoughts before we wrap up here?
I think that's it. My final thought is I'm very glad there are, I think, no videos of me debating other than not an LD, I don't think. So
that's a great question. Now, Tanya, do I have 3 videos of you debating that are unlisted from practice rounds from the you and Matt era and so on and so forth? I sure do. Now, will those ever see the light of day? No, because I'm not a snake or a rat.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Shout out to Secret Rat.
That's good, especially if it's from the Matt era. I think I know the video you're talking about.
Yeah, the one where it's like spinning because we like. Anyway, that's a secret you'll never know about. I'll never tell. Snitches get stitches. That is it for us. I'm gonna hit stop recording. Another one, Proteus Debate Academy. Thanks, Tanya. Thank you, past Dallas, Paul, Grace, and